Audio Jungle.
Hello, everyone, and hope everybody has had a great start to the year 2025. A lot has happened in 2024 in terms of the advancements that we see in the tech world, the policy world, with the coming in of additional consultations in DPDPA and many more such things. Just last week, Social Media Matters hosted a wonderful consultation at the Canada House with collaboration to the High Commission of Canada and India. And in that, we had a panel where we had representation from law, from tech development, and fact checking units. And there it really emerged that that conversation needs a follow up of one very serious concern which emerged out as an AI threat, and that is deepfake. We've been hearing a lot about in the media about how deepfake has really has started impacting the lives of young and common users. There were news reports of young schoolgirls getting their deepfake made and then getting impacted, the kind of media reports that are coming out, and then the role of the law enforcement, the policy framework that all of us are looking at. So today, we thought that it's a good time to get a panel together where we have representation from civil society with Pratishtha, who's the CEO of Social Media Matters, Amitabh Kumar, who's the co-founder of Contrast.ai, and then we have Animesh Sinha from Animesh Sinha and Partners, and Puneet Agarwal also, who was also at the Canada House panel from Animesh Sinha and Partners. So together we've put together this panel where we are looking at all these perspectives, but the core idea and the topic of concern today remains deepfake. And thank you to all my panelists who have taken out their very, very important time, especially the lawyers who are sitting out here. So, but Ami and Pratishtha, do not feel that I'm not giving you much importance. You are equally important, but it's just that I've spent some time in the courts and laws, and I really think lawyers, are very, very busy people. So I'm very thankful that all of you can join in. And I'm going to start with one big question where I want answers from all my panelists in one sentence. What do you believe is the biggest threat posed by deep fake tech today? Ladies first, so Pratishtha, you go ahead.
Thank you for that question. I think this is a very important discussion which is happening. But in terms of what is the biggest deep threat, I feel it's the digital identity of a user, which, through this technology can be carried away and it can be misused by anybody because now the technology has become such that you just give the information to the person that I want this kind of an image to be produced, and it will just create it, be it a child or be it a teenager or be it an adult with any gender. So that technology can be misused with the identity of a person. So I feel digital identity can be at the risk.
All right. So digital identity as a threat. Great input. Puneet, do you want to go next?
Sure. So for me, the biggest risk has to be the rampant spread of misinformation that can take place through deep fakes. With how easy deepfake technology has made it to spread misinformation, and considering how misinformation can cut across sectors, that for me the biggest threat has to be the rampant spread of misinformation. I believe deepfake technologies, they can really aid in spreading misinformation, and because misinformation can cut across sectors rather, the damage it can cause is very severe. So for me, that has to be the biggest threat of deepfake content.
Right. So digital identity and then misinformation. Animesh?
I think I would say it with a little bit of a tangent to say it is the biggest challenge to enforcement agencies. And if you ask me, if I were to summarize it and constrict it in a short manner, I will simply say enforcement.
All right. Amitabh?
Yeah, I echo what the three panelists said, and I would look into it from perspective of truth decay. So in the age of information, if information cannot be trusted, then our stems, be it of democracy, be it of law enforcement, be it of media, all become very weak. So how do we reinforce trust in the internet, in the digital spaces, in the computer itself, becomes a very big question. Also, it's a very big question on content moderation, because till now, all the problems could be, in theory, humanly content moderated. The problem with deepfakes are these are not detectable by the human eye or the human ear, right? So this is where we need to bring about a systemic change. And I know even on the panel we spoke about it multiple times, but when Mark Zuckerberg says that content moderation needs to be changed, who's a very strong, rich, powerful, and responsible leader of this industry, then we all need to take it very seriously.
Right. So detection, enforcement, misinformation, digital identity is something that I've picked up from all your conversations. And now we'll straight go and dive into the legal perspectives on deepfakes. And my first question, Animesh, maybe you want to start on that one, where I want to know that how does the current legal framework in India addresses the misuse of deepfake tech, which is, I believe, very easily accessible now? And are there any existing laws that can be applied very effectively to tackle it?
Let me put this in perspective. What deepfake is doing is that it is amplifying crime. Deepfake by itself can be a crime, but largely the problem that it faces is that it is amplifying crime. Now, we do have laws which deal with crime. And here, let me make a broad distinction. There will be a need to prosecute and there will be a need to compensate. And when you say what are the laws that exist, they are broadly going to exist to cover either of these spectrums. So, for example, if in case deepfake is going to amplify a crime which is on child sexual exploitation, the law does exist. It's not that we need an entirely new framework of laws. Similarly, if we are going to talk about compensation, there are digital crimes which are already taking place. There are crimes which are happening over the telephone. And it's not that we are in an empty space. When you ask this question, I think a lot of the users, what they want to know is has India upgraded itself and come up with laws which are very specific to deepfake? And I think we are in that process. We don't have something specific on deepfake yet. But in denouement, what I'm saying is that you don't need an entirely new framework of laws. The framework of laws which are dealing with crime and compensation already exist in this country, which will require some specific inputs here and there, some amendments here and there. And I think the system is ready to respond to this. There may be challenges, of course, and we'll discuss what could be the solutions and ways to deal with it. But I think in sum total, I'm quite positive about the legal regime that already exists to deal with this issue that is coming out through deepfakes.
Right. So, yeah, very important point that you've made is that we already have certain laws that exist and there needs to be some revisions into it. And I want to bring in Puneet over here. Puneet, you've been looking at EBDPA and laws surrounding cybercrime a lot. And the way Animesh has put it, I want to know from you that what are the legal gaps that you see which exist in prosecuting these specifically deepfake related crimes, and maybe, how can these be addressed through any sort of legislation? What sort of revisions do you see must come in at this point?
Right. So, Arnika, we discussed this during our panel discussion earlier as well. That the problem of deep fake is by no means small, but it is a new problem. Which means, and what the part that we discussed during our panel discussion was that how any prosecution from beginning to the end has a life cycle, and we are yet to see a complete life cycle in enough number of deepfake related disputes to be able to come to zero down what legal gaps actually exist. But from what can be seen from a very cursory overview of how prosecution is being handled at this point of time, how prosecution is taking place, how courts are dealing with it, there is a lack. One can work on bringing more certainty to the subject, and that certainty can be more around identifying what deepfake content is and identifying what is the source of that deepfake content. Now, I must give a caveat here to say that it is not that there are no laws that govern both these aspects, the identification of deepfake content and the source of deepfake content. What we are talking about here is, like Amitabh had mentioned earlier, to build an ecosystem, to have a systematic approach to it. And when we are talking about systematic approach, clarity goes to the root of it. So what can really help further that cause is to have legislations or to have regulations or any such legal proceedings which identify precedents that give clarity on these aspects, the identification and source of deepfakes.
Now my question is to both of you, and I think we have discussed this, in person whenever we have met, and I think it's an ongoing, evolving question. But I really want to understand and know that what is that the dissemination of deepfake. It is global in nature. I want to know that in comparison with the international frameworks which exist at the moment, and Puneet, you did mention some at the panel, on 9 January. How can Indian law, Indian legal framework align with international frameworks to combat this ever evolving concern?
So let me take that one. I think the first question is, can the Indian framework adopt frameworks from outside?
Mhm.
And the answer is an overwhelming yes, simply because we have done it consistently over the past. In fact, the Information Technology Act itself is something which we have very happily borrowed from jurisdictions which had a better opportunity to statistically understand how laws would respond to technology. And we've done it time and over again with different legislations. So, can India adopt frameworks from outside? The answer is overwhelmingly yes. Now, how do we adopt this? You see, this system is in our constitution itself, which enables us to give credence to international treaties, to international conventions. And the government has time and again come good on that. Now, what is it that the government has to do now on deepfakes? Now, I would say that Europe is in many ways leading the issue on development of rules, conversation on what kind of legislations should exist. There are some specific legislations which have already been, put into play in the US. Now, in India, we have already seen over the last 2, 3 years, our rule makers have been extremely active to adopt it. And they have been very mindful that India has its own social context, India has its own financial context, and India has its own diversity and people context. And I wouldn't say that we've reached a stage where we can say that we have been successful, but I'm overwhelmingly positive about the fact that we are in that direction, where draft legislations have come out in India, where rules have come out in India, a lot of legal awareness conferences and events are happening in India. But there's a very happy conversation how we can take the issues which are being discussed in jurisdictions where these laws have been formed with more thought, where there have been more statistical idea, and how we can apply it to our context.
Correct. Puneet, do you want to add on to this?
So I can only supplement what has come from Mr. Animesh, which is the fact that, see, we are already, this is an example I gave during our panel discussion as well. If you look at something like DPDPA, which can be seen to be a reflection of the GDPR, but still, while it is an attempt to reconcile the global laws on the subject, it still makes a distinction by identifying a child to be a person of 18 years and above, while GDPR does that to be 13 years or above. So you see, that is how we are already in the process of assimilating ourselves to the global framework while making cultural based identity distinctions wherever required.
Correct, correct. All right. So everything in consideration with the culturally nuanced country that we are, India. Pratishtha, we've spoken, Animesh hinted out about events, consultations in his response. And that brings me to you, where I want to know from you that from a civil society perspective, how can advocacy ensure that the deepfake victims get justice within the existing legal structures?
Yeah, thank you. I think so. I have a slightly different opinion as well because I'm just coming from a consultation where we had a lot of marginalized communities involved, and the challenge with the legal system is that it is not simplified for everybody, right? They're so complex and they're so like universally designed that people don't understand that where is the victim approach over here. It is very generalized. So one of the demands that also from the consultation was of the marginalized community was that we need to have more specific targeted communities, maybe laws or sections within the law, so that when there is a woman coming up they have justice over there, or anybody from a marginalized coming up, they have a kind of, there is a kind of a balance over there. So far, to the point that, how civil society organizations can basically ensure that, definitely we need to understand that do we have sufficient support as of now. I am sure that, Puneet, Animesh, you because you are lawyers, you understand that, but the masses who are not lawyers, they don't know that even that sufficient laws are there to back victims in the courts as well. So there is no kind of, clear awareness about that. And as civil society, we have been doing that, putting those little marks that, okay, there is legal support for you. But again, borrowing those some sections from different laws, and, currently from different laws, really does not bring that clarity. So we need to kind of, raise awareness to the fact that there are laws and policies, but we, of course, we need to kind of, amend. We need to kind of put that into the right structure, and needs to be more inclusive over there. That basically that backs digital users in today's time when we talk about technology and advancement of it. Of course, on the part of awareness, we need to kind of, talk about technology, that how deepfakes are being created, because still, the lack in education in the systems, people are not able to identify, how this digital world is actually working. So talking about deepfakes today, it's like, they will not be able to realize that, okay, this is a deepfake content, because that level of education is still not there. So digital literacy is at stake in India so far. And again, then, we need to kind of advocate for specialized training for law enforcement, prosecutors, for judges. Probably not at somebody who's at Supreme Court or High Court level, but of course, down the line, if we look at the block level, at the panchayat level, who's actually looking into, if anybody's eyeing on them, anybody from the grassroots is going that I'm seeking support, they don't have that level of awareness. Oh, there is IT Act. Oh, there is DIA. I was in the consultation, people did not know about that. There is something called DIA, or the government is even talking about it. And the last point is that we need to talk about collaborations. I think so. Again, within institutions, we are working in silos. We need to break that culture. We need to come together. We need to have lawyers, state actors, tech companies, civil society organizations to come forward to work together, so that we are able to ensure that, that every victim, be it of a deepfake, be it a deepfake victim, gets that justice and that support as well.
Okay. So if I've got it right, and if I can sum this up, is one, that there needs to be certain simplification of law, that, and then that part needs to be taken to the user so that they know what sort of legal structures they have, legal reforms they have at the moment, and then also collaboration between tech, law, civil society, and similar vectors who are in the field, working with the users and directly handling user cases. So that. Yes, and then I think it's a great time now to bring Amitabh in to talk a bit about the technological solutions that we have at the moment to create deepfakes, to combat deepfakes. And with the Contrast.ai, I think the tool has really been picked up by well-known media organizations. So Amitabh, I want to know from you that what role do you think can AI-based detection tools, and very specifically, I've put that in AI-based detection tools, play in identifying and then mitigating the deepfake content? And are these tools accessible? Are they effective enough? You can take examples of Contrails or any other that you want to take up.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so good that we are continuing this discussion because at every panel we say we need to talk more, but it usually does not happen. So thanks for taking it forward. When it comes to artificial intelligence, because it is the one creating the mayhem, the deepfakes are getting created by it. We need tools to detect and remove it on three aspects. One is scalability. The velocity at which deepfakes are getting created in the world today can only be matched by an artificial intelligence mechanism. So that is number one. Number two is global adaptability. So, for example, at Contrails, we are working with fact checkers across the globe. We have built multiple data streams, so we are getting threat attack vectors from across the globe. So, globally, it is much easier to collaborate on technology than it is in, let's say, in law or civil society, because that takes its own process. Whereas in technology, you just learn the code and you share it. And the last part is collaboration. So, while we are solving, it's also good to think about platformization and creating a network effect. It is a responsibility of every tech company that if a person is on the internet, they are safe. It's just as simple as that. The law, the awareness, the state will step in later. It's the business of the internet which needs to ensure that all its customers are safe, regardless of whether they are paying or not. So, artificial intelligence, when it comes to deepfake detection, is probably the only way to detect deepfakes because they are very difficult to detect with the naked eye. Having said that, it is not a silver bullet, right? Because artificial intelligence, even the best in every case scenario, is only 90% precise. That means 10% of the cases, regardless of the scenario, the same in deepfake will pass through. And this is where we need experts in the loop, as it is called in this space. Um, AI tools are not a silver bullet. They are just tools. So while the industry is pushing it, I also have a startup which is building it. It is not the only solution and it does not work in a silo. Like everybody said, and we will reiterate that when it comes to keeping humans safe, there are multiple stakeholders. And AI is just one tool. It begins with the school and the family. The awareness part is still very, very important. And the law is the final, so to say, the frontier. Because in India, like Animesh said, like Puneet added, amendments are required. And amendments are required basically even on definition. What is a deepfake? What is malicious content? We need to put very, very clear guardrails to ensure that human harm does not take place, right? At the moment, there are cases going on, even on the big companies like OpenAI, like Gemini, in Indian courts right now, where an output has actually harmed somebody. So we need to understand in Indian cultural context how artificial intelligence will work for all the Indians, not the 12 crore rich empowered, but the rest of the long tail as well. So complex questions, but I would stop with scalability, global adaptability, and collaboration is where artificial intelligence tools like the one created by Contrails can really play an important role.
So you mentioned about collaboration with the big tech platforms, and I really think that can be one great way because the distribution is something where these social media tech platforms are coming in the picture. So just wanting to know, and you're free to and choose to answer or not respond to this, but as Contrails.ai, have you ever approached the big tech? Have you spoken to the platforms, and what was the kind of response that you received from them?
Well, totally, totally. No, I mean, all the big platforms, the VLOPs, we have approached them. We have told them about the technology. We are at an early stage as a startup. We are bootstrapped. So probably it will be a stepwise integration. But the people we are working with are many of them are backed by these platforms. So I think the platforms are also trying to solve at scale and in a manner where it is sustainable. So I think, and I'll always, just like Animesh, be very optimistic about collaboration. Uh, Platforms are not difficult; they're just different. Let's just look into that part. Their scales are unimaginable for any normal company, anybody who hasn't worked at that scale. So we are slowly getting there, and I'm sure in the coming years they'll be using our solution. In fact, fingers crossed that they'll be using our solution.
All right, good luck with that. And Animesh, Amitabh has also mentioned in between, but evidence is something that, and I think, I don't know if I remember correctly, if I was discussing it with you or Puneet at the event, that evidence is something which has become a little complicated and it adds to the complication of dealing with deepfake related crimes. So I want to know from you that how do you view the legal implication of using AI detection tool in cases of deepfake related crimes, and can these tools really serve as evidence in the court?
I think first I will take a cue from all my panelists because they made some very valid points on some issues. First is what Pratishtha said. She says that laws cannot be apathetic. It cannot be dry. It has to fit to a context. And when it has to fit to a context, it cannot be a top-down approach. We are a very diverse country with many different social contexts, financial contexts, and largely the law and enforcement agencies are not seen as a very affable institution to approach. And that is going to make a major problem when we are dealing with tech-related issues. Because one, you are dealing with an uncertain legal framework for a lot of people, and then you are dealing with a technology which is uncertain by itself. this compounds the fear. Now, what is the solution? The solution is what has been suggested, that laws have to be empathetic. There has to be an ecosystem. And as Puneet rightly said, that we can't take it lightly. The problem is not a small one, and it cannot be solved by some stakeholders. There has to be an ecosystem that involves all the stakeholders. In the backdrop of this, what Ami is saying makes sense to such an extent that I see that even if you're not going to have these softwares or these technologies, I think we won't be able to take this particular project further. The human eye and the system, the classical system as it exists today, is not equipped to deal with this problem. And we can legislate as much as we want. Our intent may be great. We may be able to magically bring our enforcement agencies up to scratch. But even then, even in an ideal situation of that nature, without technology, I don't think we are anywhere close to combating this. Therefore, the role of softwares which are going to detect and which are going to do so much more to prevent this from happening, and then later to solve a problem from happening, solve a problem which has already happened, is extremely critical. Now, how do we formally use it as evidence? I think first let us look at prevention, which is largely what should be our focus today. If in case we can use these particular softwares to prevent problems from happening, that should be our number one agenda. Now, I see that there are two very important components: cost and easy usability. Now, if I am an ordinary citizen, I may find it very difficult to use a software, even if I've heard of it. And say Pratishtha has done her role and the civil society has put it to my knowledge. The second question is, do I have the money to use it? If I think that this is so critical that I will use my money, or there are some organizations which are willing to fund me on this, or the state is willing to compensate me for this, will I be able to use it by myself, or will I have to approach somebody else? This is where in India we have a very unique social context. Privacy means different things to different societies. And we are very private people, especially to the kind of risks that we are talking about. We are talking about a child being sexually exploited. We are talking about a child who may have financially misused his parents' information. We are even talking about adults who may just be shy that they have been duped of a crime. As funny as it sounds and as odd as it sounds, there have been people who are so shy that they have been duped that they don't even want to come out and say that they have been duped, which otherwise may sound paradoxical. Very educated people, smart people, professional people. We've also had instances where people who are in the media, who are dealing with people, have gotten cheated by deepfakes and they have become a victim of it. Therefore, even if we go beyond prevention and there has been a crime that happens, the evidence to be presented in court cannot be the classic evidence which is on paper and which is on tangible material data. This has to be expert driven. There have to be softwares who can identify and present to courts what is a credible evidence, what is not a credible evidence. Now, I wouldn't get into the technicalities of how courts in India take expert evidences and how courts in India will take technology as evidences. But I would say that, that system already exists. Now, major issue which we as lawyers are thinking, and I'm sorry, I'm continuing with this answer slightly more, and that is that what happens once a problem has already occurred, and now I am in court, because you see, identification is an issue, enforcement is an issue, takedown is an issue, prosecution is an issue, compensation is an issue. And without evidence, you see, we will go into the same conversation that goes around in our country to say that there may be people who are high and mighty who can't be brought to book. The enforcement is not equipped enough to bring people to book. We just do not have a system which is able to respond timely. And if in case we are not going to get support from people like Ami, from softwares which are going to partner in this, I think the other silos, we are going to simply be insufficient to deal with this.
Very importantly, you've mentioned that from identification to compensation, the issue is such that there are a lot of problems that already arise. And you did mention about what about the marginalized communities who are getting affected by this, who cannot really, maybe possibly not afford, even if there is tech available. And Pratisha, that wants me to bring you back in the conversation that you also hinted upon it. My question to you is that how can technology be made accessible to the marginalized communities for protection and awareness? And I also want you to respond to it once Pratishtha has given her answer.
I think currently technology is more for the privileges. In India, it is still has not reached many parts where people are grappling with high paced devices or even internet for that matter. So technology has not reached many so far. It's mainly for more for the selective groups, I would say that. But to make it more accessible, of course, when there are problems, we also have solutions to it. And in the coming times, we need to think, we need to have that kind of an approach that, what is that we can solve out to this larger issue that we are grappling with. Um, to make it more accessible for the larger community. I think so. We need to think of which are devices which are more affordable for people. Of course, the taxes in India are so high that people they keep thinking about should I buy or purchase that particular device because I will end up paying so much of taxes. So do we need to think that when we are talking about technology advancement, do we need to bring these devices to prices where everybody can afford to purchase it? Also with the internet packages, or do we need to have India to be as a Wi-Fi country, right? We need to have more internet services which are kind of affordable and accessible to people by having more big companies and players coming into the role so that they're able to reach out to the exterior parts where internet is still untouched. Of course, while we're talking about technology, we can't leave it without the digital literacy programs that we have been talking about. We need to ensure that at the elementary levels, in the schools itself, that there are programs in the education systems. It is a mandate that every child has to study about digital skills or digital safety, and maybe having digital literacy programs for students in schools and up till colleges. So that is something we need to kind of think about. And additionally, we need to think of the localized digital content. We think from the very Western notion that okay, everything is in English, or we need to break that down. When we talk about India, we need to break that down more into regional, more into localized languages, so that everybody can understand what exactly the content is when it comes to technology. The dissemination should be such that it is layered, that if it is created by a big tech, it is layered and simplified so that it can reach to many others in their own languages. So talking about different issues, like deepfake is one. People still don't know what deepfake is, because still we are talking about what is digital safety. So we need to have that kind of an approach, that we are making it more inclusive, where we're talking about scams, abuses, that everybody is going through. So when it comes to the fact that how we can make technology accessible, of course affordability is one, and thinking that we have it can be reached to the masses.
All right. So one very valid point that you've made is about using regional languages and awareness that has to be made in regional languages so that the masses can really connect with it, basically understand and then be able to use it. And also one takeaway from your response is that there needs to be the money, the cost needs to be broken down, which is at the moment, and make it become affordable, then have this as a component in your digital literacy curriculums and modules wherever you're talking about it. Ami, your response to it, you are developing a tech like this. Your response to how can the awareness and protection tech be made accessible at the moment, and how practical that is?
Yeah, I think a couple of questions. I mean, the good part is that India has already started making thoughts about it. When we look into Digital India, Make in India, Startup India, they are not implemented in the best manner, but the thought process is beautiful, right? Who will build for India? The expectation that a foreign country will do it is not such a good expectation. Indian students turning into Indian entrepreneurs, Indian leaders, solving for India. The other thing, let's go back to the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. India lives in villages. Are we thinking district level, or are we constantly thinking San Francisco? The problem with a lot of Indian money is, let's build here because it is cheap, let's sell it there because the profit is maximum. That is all, if not maybe one or two startups are a little different. When it comes to safety tech, the great opportunity is that solving for Indians also gives you a global market, right? The other aspect of it is corporate social responsibility has to be, how do you say, in the core of the business. If the business is just making profit and not adding value to the people, then we see a lot of pollution, we see a lot of garbage. But I see an opportunity of thinking outside the box. I see an opportunity of actually including the 22 languages and the multiple dialects that it follows. I was recently in Jamshedpur with Tata Steel Foundation and interacted with multiple tribal children and tribal leaders. And it was such a great learning that without internet, without artificial intelligence, they are doing a lot better in multiple livelihood parameters, if we would put it like that. We need to get back to the roots. We need to appreciate what the country has, which is happening at a very big level. Good example is yoga, right? It is already happening. Now, artificial intelligence built in India by Indians for Indians. So the third part is what even Contrails is trying to do, where we can proudly say that when it comes to Indian deepfakes, we are the best solution in the world. Now that's a big position to take in a place which is multi-million, multi-billion dollar funded. The other aspect, and it is very difficult, work together with the government and the cybercrime units, work together with the lower courts as well, with the judges, with the lawyers. It is not easy. But if you do 5 to 10 years of this very hard work, the change is going to be systemic. This technology is not going to be worth it if it is only sold in the United States. This technology will be golden and amazing if contrails can also serve all the district, lower, higher, and Supreme Court of India. Can we work with every cybercrime cell? That is a part of our dream and our mission. Very difficult. I'm not saying it is already done, it is already solved. But as an entrepreneur, as a team, we need to keep it at the core of our work. That are we serving India? The mission remains in the center and the business is built around it, which makes it very difficult to build the business. But then that's the fun of entrepreneurship.
I think in all the responses, one thing that I can really gather is that the problem is at an industrial scale, and hence we need to look at industrial solutions, and hence we are talking more about collaborations from all the sectors who are sitting here and then others, who are not present at the moment. And hence talking about the tech companies. So, Puneet, I want to know from you that should tech companies have a legal obligation to embed deepfake detection in their platforms? And what sort of challenges do you see might arise if there is such a mandate?
So thank you, Arnika. I think that is one subject on which Ami has already weighed in when he says that they should this obligation should be upon them, and I would completely second Amitabh on that. Except that I would like to add a bit of legal perspective to it, which is to say that asking whether it should be the responsibility of big techs to incorporate deepfake detection tools in their platform is not just an emotional plea. It has some legal basis behind it. And while without sounding too technical about it, we have something in law called the no fault liability. And I'll just explain in just one quick line what that means, which is to say that if you employ something which can cause an injury, then it is your responsibility to make sure that it does not cause that injury, right? So with that legal basis, it is not just an emotional plea that big tech should do this, and big tech should introduce the deepfake on the deepfake detection tools on their platform. There is some legal basis to it also. But addressing the second part of your question, that does this incorporation platform poses any kind of challenges? And I think there also we need to be mindful of the fact that we cannot view all platforms from the big tech perspective. Take Contrail's AI, for example, right? We are a country which is full of entrepreneurs, which is full of ingenuity, innovation. And when it comes down to law, it has to apply squarely. When you make that obligation to a legal requirement, it has to apply squarely, which can present a lot many challenges. So, I remember when Pratishtha was speaking, she pointed out certain very important aspects like lack of accessibility, getting this technology to the grassroots level. She spoke of infrastructure. Now you imagine, it is easy for us to imagine a big tech company not facing these challenges, but it might not be the same for a young entrepreneur who has come up with a platform. We do not want it this incorporation to be at the cost of young ingenuity, right? Similarly, as Animesh pointed out, that when we are talking about prosecution or deepfake, timeliness is a very important factor. Now, imagine again, to put it in perspective, imagine a platform which is not a big tech platform yet. For them, and even for a big tech platform, let me extend this analogy to them also. The process from identification of big tech to addressing it, to taking it down, to getting relief to a person, this is a time consuming process. While we are all trying to strive to reduce that timeline, but it cannot be denied that as on date that timeline does exist. And to what extent would incorporation of these tools help in reducing that timeline is something that time will only tell. One final thought that I can share is that while yes, there should be, while yes, there can be challenges, while yes, there is maybe a need to segregate platforms based on what their infrastructure capabilities are. What is a low hanging fruit for most platforms is something like labeling of content, which can be content creator oriented or which can be the platform oriented. I think it is easy to label something as an AI content or mandatorily require something to be labeled as AI generated content, then to introduce some then to incorporate a tool which helps detection in AI, especially when there is lack of awareness, like as Pratishtha said, even at the grassroots level. Now, I am not for a second suggesting that that should not be there. When you ask me the question whether it should be there, I am all in favor of it being there. But yes, subject to being mindful of what challenges it can pose, because we cannot qualify all entrepreneurs. We cannot view all entrepreneurs from the big tech lens.
And you've very nicely put, brought in this one thing about smaller platforms, which, with the larger, even we are a field organization, and we see that, the smaller platforms who we are really not talking about at larger panel discussions, they have a great user base, and they
Correct.
add to a lot when you're talking about dissemination of this sort of content. So I think a great point there that we need to also look at them, and also the feasibility of the platforms to adapt to the technology and
Yes,
then implement.
because it does create those compliance related challenges, especially for young platforms, right?
Correct, correct.
Yeah, and just to add over here, I think one important point is, which is a common term in trust and safety world, is safety by design. We constantly talk about big tech because multiple people use it, but there are things like safety, like gender, like legal hygiene that cannot be done later. You need to start thinking about it from day zero. And then, depending on your scale, you need to uh, adopt it into your technology, into your platform. So, putting in standards, if you have 0 to 10 users, this is a standard, 10 to 100, 100 to 1000, keeping in mind India has great minds, right? We are great at writing laws. If we collaborate, all said and done, DPDPA, DIA are great collaborative efforts. Putting in standards based on the volume and the size of the platform, and we have done it in other industries. When it comes to engines in the auto industries, aviation industry, the same can be done in tech industry. It just has to be clear, and a lot of awareness has to be raised through it, putting in universities like IITs, IIMs in the core of it. So if the entrepreneur knows on day one, like we know about taxation, that if we earn so much money, we need to get a GST. This level of clarity on safety tech is something that needs to come in. These are guidelines, these are amendments which Animesh was talking about. And I think over these next 2 years, 25, 26 specifically, we will see this coming in because it's already started happening in the UK, in the United States, in Australia. So India will also not lag behind. I wouldn't be surprised that post the budget session, the next session, we will already see a lot of conversation around online safety standards. And I think it's time that we started having them for India as
Okay, that's nicely put. Um, Pratishtha, every panelist has hinted upon awareness that and they've agreed to your point of that it needs to be there at every level, at the grassroots in tier two, tier three cities, everywhere. I want to know from you if you can share an example, anything specific that you know of a grassroots action or awareness campaign. Basically, wanted to know that how has civil society at the moment has responded to deepfake cases so far, and I'm asking because social media matters does have a helpline, and there are many such cases that we're receiving on a daily basis. So, what sort of action and response mechanism do you have?
I'm so glad that people are agreeing to the awareness part. But on the responding part, so we at Social Media Matters, we respond to deep fakes and other issues through various online and offline campaigns. So we do run many campaigns, which involves many young voices as well, and that reaches out to other members in the society as well, like the parents, the teachers, even the young voices, the state actors as well. So running these campaigns are kind of really helpful for us. In terms of escalation of the cases, we help like through we do a lot of workshops in colleges, and that really helps us to kind of gather or open the dialogue between the young voices and building that trust in them so that they can reach out to us in case of any support that they're looking forward. So we escalate these cases to the big tech companies where we have a direct contact, and we help the cases of deepfakes and other issues as well escalated directly to them, and we help them resolve them at the earliest hour which we can, because it is like again there is a battle between the CSOs and the big tech companies over there, to the fact that the response mechanism or the response rate is very low, so we keep fighting for that. Please think from the victim's point of view that they're looking for the soonest, the earliest resolving of the case. So we, through our end, we escalate these cases to these big tech companies. And additionally, we last year we initiated a campaign called Drive for Digital Safety, where we were going to various education institutions into the colleges, and we were raising awareness about deep fakes as well. So one of the components that we covered during these workshops and these sessions was that how young voices needs to be aware about these deep fakes, because that is like last year only, like we called it like one of the upcoming issues and the trends that we identified even through our researchers. So voicing about the fact that people need to be aware, and we kind of realized that this is a real time problem for many young voices. So we are doing kind of offline and online campaigns, and we are escalating these cases to the big tech companies.
That's great, and I've been a part of it, and I really understand that when you have a victim on the other side, speaking to them or emailing with them, the kind of response that they really need is second by second. They need to know what's happening with the report they made, because we all understand in this sphere that the virality of internet is what is creating the panic, and it is very disturbing to even for a second breathe knowing that there is some disturbing or inappropriate content of yours taken without your consent and being circulated. So I think that is something user first approach and a quicker response mechanism is what we need to look at. It's been a great discussion, and that brings me to almost last questions for all my panelists here. And I'm gonna begin with Amitabh here. Amitabh, tell us about that. What are the technical challenges in creating solutions for deepfake detection that are scalable for a diverse and a culturally nuanced country like India?
Yeah, India is big, 700 whatever 70 districts. So let's start with linguistic diversity. 22 official languages, multiple dialects. Most of them have not been digitally stored anywhere, right? So data scarcity, wherever there's data scarcity, AI cannot learn very well. Then comes to contextualizing this data. Every, like, our culture keeps on changing. There are various sayings about that. So in some context, let's talk about caste. Certain castes are high in certain states of India, and they are low and problematic or in scheduled castes in the other states of India. So contextualizing at a hyper local level becomes like a really big issue. of course, resource scarcity in every manner possible. We are talking about roughly 2 billion people, and they are very, very different people. So, how do you digitally document them, then train the AI on it so that it can solve for them? It's a evolving space. So, the great part is it is getting cheaper by the day, right? So, NVIDIA, what it was a year back, is about 200% cheaper today. So, this really helps us in moving forward. But on the other side, bad actors are not sleeping. So the threat landscape is evolving constantly. The deepfakes that Digvijay I and team at Contrails were solving during Indian elections and the deepfakes today are completely different from each other. So you have to constantly evolve yourself. And the last part, unless people know that it is a deepfake, how are they supposed to send it to us? And only AI can say that it's a deep fake. So you see, there's a chicken and egg problem over there. That the reporting will be very, very little because if it feeds into my bias, I will probably not report it. So I think that space, all the constraints, and each of them is also an opportunity because we know what the problem is. The problems are very well identified. The great part about India is that most of the amazing AI researchers, innovative minds on artificial intelligence and research sit in this country. Our IITs and triple IITs and IIMs and JNUs are amazing at doing this work. So I see a lot of impact being made collaborating with these universities and changing these problems into solutions.
Right, and you're right that the bad actors are not sleeping. They're also keeping up with the fast evolving nature and considering the fast evolving nature of the deepfake tech. Animesh, what should be the long-term legal strategy that we should have to stay ahead of them?
I think awareness and action, these are 2 points which have come out from this conversation and pretty much is coming out from every such conversation that we are having. And both these aspects of awareness and action need to have very fast legs. Uh, as Ami said, the challenge that we are facing is constantly evolving. And if we don't evolve awareness and if we don't evolve action, we may not be able to combat something like this. What should be a long-term legal perspective? Rulemaking, because law needs to be certain. We are dealing with an uncertain space. The first thing that we require is certain laws. Second, which is the greatest challenge, expeditious enforcement, because time is of the essence. We need to prosecute on time. We need to prevent on time. We need to punish on time. We need to compensate on time. If action is not timely and if the legal system does not respond to that, I think a lot of the battle will be lost. And lastly, there has to be a constant review to better this ecosystem. As Ami said, the problem that he saw a couple of months back to what he's seeing today is entirely different. As Pratishtha has been raising it time and again to say that when you're going to different villages, different social contexts, different financial contexts, the problem is very different. So the legal system cannot be dry. It has to constantly review and be able to make this ecosystem constantly tick as the problem is evolving. So these are 3 things I will identify as things which we should keep in the center space for a long-term legal strategy.
Pratishtha, you're working at a community level. I want to know from you that what are the actionable steps that civil society can take to build resilience against deepfakes at a community level?
I think so. This is a very powerful question as well because action is what that we have been thinking about, and solution is that what we're looking into. I think so. We need to since I've been talking about young voices. So creating maybe college ambassadors or young ambassadors that can promote timely on the issues that are coming up, especially in the space of internet and when we're talking about deepfakes as well. So these ambassadors can be a great channel, even because it will be more localized. So when we have ambassadors in the regional, in the regions, or probably My aim is to have one ambassador in each district, though, so that we are able to map the whole of India. And one of the volunteer programs that we are also running at Social Media Matters, that any student who is a part of any education institutions wants to partner, wants to join hands, can be a volunteer with us, so that we are able to reach out to the masses. And they're more powerful. They can just leave an impact on any person of any generation. So we're creating that network. Also, enhancing and building the capacities of local partners, or maybe through through trainings and workshop sessions at the community level as well. For the like with that, I mean, even the Anganwadi workers, if we build their capacities, will be really helpful. That if anybody is coming or reaching out to them and even talking about, this scam happened to me, so they're able to give the quick tips to them, that okay, you can do this, or you can reach out to organizations like Social and Media Matters, or even for that matter, lawyers like Animesh and Puneet. So kind of building that capacity for them, giving them kind of information to them. So I think so these are some actionable measures that we can, at civil society organization, can be adapted. And civil societies, many civil societies, not only Social Media Matters, but many others are also working at the grassroots, so we can bridge everybody at every step, so that we all are one, and we are able to solve the issues at a larger scale.
Sharing and collaboration is the way to move forward. And my last question of today, and that goes to Puneet. Puneet, tell me one legal reform that can significantly curb the deepfake misuse in India.
Pratishtha, I would here like to borrow from both Animesh and Amitabh when they mentioned that this is an evolving ecosystem, right? And say that with a caveat that like the problem is not small, but it is definitely a new one. So what we are looking at is a system as an ecosystem which is more certain. What we are lacking today is lack of that certainty, like Animesh rightly pointed out. What can really help further this cause, if we have more certainty in terms of what is the task force who has been, if there's an identified task force to deal with cases or deep fakes on a public level infrastructure basis, if there are specific inputs which are highlighted, specific details that are to be mentioned in complaints arising out of deepfake, that will help streamline the legal process. If there is a timeline identified that all deepfake related disputes are to be disposed of in a particular given timeline, some of these steps can really go further in targeting and, in fact, combating deepfake.
This was certainly a very enlightening discussion. Thank you so much for making time. And I think uh, I will try and summarize it that, we've looked at very different aspects of it, of the technological interventions, the work that's happening at the grassroots side, at the community level, and then what's happening at the tech side. What is it that the law is facing when people are in court battling these cases of deep fakes? And I think awareness and action is something that has come up in all the responses well. Collaboration is the way ahead, key ahead, because it is an ever evolving, a fast evolving crime. AI, and I did mention, and I really like Harari's take on it, that we have, I think, summoned the power that we are not able to mentor and control at the moment. So I think now that that time has passed, we really need to look into how mentorship can come in place, how ethical AI can be brought into practice. There needs to be rule making law. Animesh, you pointed out that law needs certainty, and with the space that we are tackling, with the ever evolving cybercrime, AI bringing in more challenges every day, there needs to be certainty. And I think more discussions, consultations, and also sharing of case studies is something that we all need to do here. Some actionable solutions. Pratishtha, you very well mentioned, about having young ambassadors, change leaders in every district. I think that can bring in a big, wave of change out there, and with the ripple effect can also be multiplied and looked at as a even as a global solutions. So, and Amitabh, that one point that stayed with me is that, solving for Indians can really lead to a solution which can be later adapted to at a global level. And Puneet, the last point that you've mentioned, that an identified task force can really possibly help escalate the issues in the court, and maybe gives immediate and or a sooner relief to people who are actually pretty brave and coming out and trying to access the law and find a solution, legal solutions to the problems that they're facing. Because, and I'm saying it because when we deal with the victims, when we speak with them, it is very also difficult to convince them, to ask them to gather up the courage and then file a FIR, taking the legal route, because as I mentioned, they're already living in a moment of panic. So I think with an identified task force, we will be possibly able to address that issue, that there are certain people who are sensitive enough also to look into that issue, speak to the victim, and also work alongside with other stakeholders involved in that. I hope I've summarized this well. There was a lot that we talked about, and I think we really need to continue this discussion, which we will do once my great panelists have more time for this discussion. But we will reach out to you. But for today, thank you for making time. And for any additional comment, guys, please feel free to share it with us. There is a big network that we have while we work on the field. People do come in and keep asking for advices and insights. So as experts, anything that comes to your mind, just shoot an email to us and we'll be happy to share that update or that resource with our network. But till then, thank you so much for making time, and all of you have a great day now.
Audio Jungle.